Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Gold Standard Podcast. I'm here with our special guest today, Isaac Bermudez, who is our Chief Innovation Officer in our California branch at BDA. I also have our co-hosts, Briana and Brandon, as always. And as you can see, it looks a little different than our normal studio. We are coming to you live from CalABA here in California, and hence why we have Isaac on today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. Typically what we like to do, first and foremost, is we like to get to know who our guests are and how you really got started into ABA. So, let's dive in there.
Sure.
How did you get started?
The classic question.
The classic question.
Yes. Let me see. I want to. So the perspective that I'm now answering this question is, I'm a dad to two college-age kids, and it kind of goes back to around that time for me when I was, probably my earliest memories when I was in 8th grade, and I started getting the pull to help people when I first started thinking, what am I going to do in life? So I knew I wanted to help people. I didn't know how. There was many iterations of that in my mind. When I graduated college, it's when I was a psychology major. And I sprayed my resume out. I wasn't sure what to do as a psychology major, but I knew I wanted to help. And I think that's the only way I could describe it. It's where a series of divine interventions happened for me. So yes, I could say I kind of fell into it by accident. All that
The
stuff.
calling happened.
But yeah, I kind of see it as kind of the path started to open up for me. Where one of the places that called me back was an adult day program working with individuals, adults with developmental disabilities, behavior issues. I went on to the interview, and, I'd always envisioned myself being able to work with really challenging individuals. One of the movies I liked back in the days, it's an old movie, is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
One of my favorites too.
Yeah. So movies like that always really inspired me. And being able to work with vulnerable individuals was something that really called at me. So I remember driving into my interview, and there were individuals that were walking a little different. Maybe things were coming out of their mouth, and they were making different sounds and stuff. And I remember, instead of feeling scared, I felt really excited. And I felt like, oh, this is that experience that I was looking for, that I envisioned. So fortunately, at the time, this was in the late 90s. If you had a car and you breathed, they hired you. So I was able to get that opportunity. And that was essentially my introduction to applied behavior analysis, because the director of the facility and also the owner of the company were prominent behavior analysts. So we ran a lot of ABA programs, and that was my introduction to the whole behavioral approach. Up until then, I would say that was my least favorite class or classes in my undergraduate program. I used to be a lot more interested in abnormal psychology, psychoanalysis, all of that stuff interested me more. I remember the psychology of learning and operant conditioning, all that stuff. I was like, get that away from me. But the application piece is what just really called at me. To be able to collect data and see the impact of the work that we're doing and be able to see it graphically displayed, to me, was just really, really reinforcing. And it was essentially the hook that hooked me into not only this profession, but the science. Yeah. So that was the beginning of it. Yeah.
And that's something interesting that you said that, because, and I know this will kind of tie into what you do now, thinking about behavior analysis, and even, we've talked about before how we fell into it, didn't really know what it was. Historically, we've been poor disseminators of the science to other people, where it appears as boring because you're just like so focused and so rote, where now, that kind of plays into some of the things you do today, and how you spread the word and disseminate the science in a more palatable way.
Yeah. I think so. I think a lot of where I focused my career on has kind of like a series of traumas that I've been trying to overcome, where early on, when I started, although in that very first experience I felt like I had really good training and support. When I ventured into working with kids, there was less of that. And Being a type A person, I've always wanted to know that I was doing great, and I would be very tormented by not knowing. Like, am I doing good? I don't know what I'm doing. Like, can somebody help me? Because I want to be really good at this, and nobody was coming, and it was just like this constant, you know, torment that I would experience, and that kind of led to feelings of burnout. There was a lot of driving. There was a lot of working with very challenging kiddos and individuals. I remember my first experience working with kids. I drove to a school. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I'll never forget. I walk into the class, and I'm like, "Hey, my name's Isaac. I'm supposed to be working with so and so. Like, who's the student?" And there was a student on the floor throwing a big old tantrum, and the teacher was like, "That one." I was like, "Oh my god!" So then, like that, those stories where I feel like if there was somebody there where I could be like, "Oh my, like what do I do?" But there wasn't. So it was one of those sink or swim situations where I had to figure it out, and it could have broke me. It did lead to feelings of burnout, but that's kind of part of what has positioned me and has driven me to focus my career on what I do, which maybe will come out later. But yeah.
And I think that's also the toughest part too, because a lot of what we do in the field, we get from the experience first. Is you can tell someone, you could read a behavior plan, but until you're actually implementing it and you're seeing exactly where you should position your body, your hands, the way that you say whatever it is that you're trying to get out, it doesn't always go exactly as that behavior plan is written. So when you walk into a classroom and some situation where the teacher's like, "Oh, well, that's your student, the one on the ground," they kind of look at you like, "Where's your magic wand? You can fix this, and you're going to fix this. This is your problem. It's not mine anymore." So even when we do succeed, it's that day in and day out of like, "Hey, where's your magic wand? Like you have to fix this." And once that one challenging student might be, progressing or being able to sit in his chair or being able to endure longer sessions of work, then it's on to the next. But time after time, that does kind of wear and tear, and that's something that it's talked about, but I don't think it's exactly expressed the way that a lot of clinicians really do feel. It does kind of tear at you, and it makes you kind of question, like, do I really want to do this every single day, or is there something else for me?
Right. Totally. And I can understand, everybody that does this work, I'm sure, has those questions, and the brave and those that get called by what we do, push through and make this a career. But I can understand why there's so much turnover also. I mean, this is really hard work. And I used to tell people back in the days, "Oh, this is not rocket science. Anybody could do this." But I, since then, talk about it differently. It is rocket science, and it's really hard work. So, you really, you have to be reinforced by being able to help people and being truly, genuinely reinforced by seeing other people get better by what services we bring, because the money will never be enough. The fame, none of that will ever be enough to sustain us doing this day in, day out for many, many years. Besides being reinforced by seeing people succeed through the science.
Yeah.
So that's.
And I think that's where I got my initial self-reinforcement was, you spoke about like being able to see it graphically, is prior to me being able to graph and doing all that stuff, I had been practicing for maybe 3 or 4 years in the field, but it wasn't fully the way that I wanted it to be. So once I was able to actually start graphing on my own or seeing the data or collaborating with the BC a little bit more, I was like, wow, like the aggression's going down. Like, is that from what I'm doing? And then it was like, oh, okay, so we're making real progress here. Like, this is awesome. But again, those days where that aggression goes from 12% back up to 72%, you're like, oh man, like that, it was just not my day. So again, the wear and tear of it all. But yeah.
I do want to go back to something that you had said, because I think it's a real big buzzword right now in ABA, which is like that burnout concept. And you had said something that I don't think is ever put in the perspective that way. So you initially started as a BCBA or ABA practitioner, and it's not so much that you were looking for a supervisor that would give you the answers. It just sounded like you needed a soundboard and somebody to kind of say, you know what you're doing, and don't let that get in the way of you making a decision. And something else on top of that you referred to was the fear of the unknown. And I resonate with that so much because that is definitely something that for me gives me a lot of anxiety in any shape or form in life, not just in my career. So I try to navigate that by having plan A and plan B in case plan A has to go in the trash. So from a clinician standpoint, I can totally see where you're coming from in terms of burnout happening so early on in an individual's career, not because they don't know what to do, but just because that imposter syndrome really does take the rug out from underneath them. And I know you had said in our pre-meet that actually almost was a reason why you left the field initially. So how did you navigate that and not leave the field? Because you've done, and we're going to get into that too, such amazing work here at BDA. But
Yeah. So those technician days, I mean, it was the wild. Well, we're out west, so I'll say that it was the Wild West. In a sense of there wasn't enough supervisors, therefore supervision to have the validation, the training, the support, sounding boards. There just wasn't enough of that.
and then I'm going to assume the supervision requirements were much different back then.
You read my mind. It was different. The regulations and the expectations were so different back then. So there wasn't those guiding principles. I mean, if we look back, it was around '98. That's when the BACB was just being formed. So you were kind of hearing these buzzes of like, oh, there's going to be a certification, which then to me sounded like, oh, that's kind of cool. You could actually get certified to do this. Like, that sounds interesting. But no, I mean, there wasn't that back in those days. So everybody was just doing their best to do the work that we do. And I don't think companies, in my experience, were yet like, oh, I'm going to regionalize people to make it less difficult. They were just like, we have clients, we need staff, go. And it was just, they were just trying to pair staff with clients. So it was definitely wild, and it did lead to a lot of stress, let alone the work that we do is already stressful enough. So you're dealing with the elements, you're dealing with traffic. I think I put close to 50,000 miles on a car that first year that I was working. So there's the wear and tear, there's the expense of it. And back then it just was what it was. Thankfully I was excited enough to be working in my field, So I was like, okay, cool. This is going to lead to something. And that kind of carried me through, just having good work ethic, carried me through the whole grit idea, carried me through. But, you kind of reach a point where, there is kind of a breaking point. And I remember about 3-4 years in, I was just exhausted. I was just like I can't, and that's when I started to look elsewhere and say, you start dreaming of, I just want to go to an office and just clock in, do my work, clock out, and be done with this. And that's, I remember at that time interviewing with the probation department, and I was kind of going through the interviews, and I made it to the last interview, and I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm done with the ABA life, and I'm going to go into that direction. And again, another divine intervention in my life. The day before my last interview, the owner of the company at the time called and said, hey, I'm looking, I need supervisors, and I'd love to promote you to being a senior therapist or supervisor at the time. So it was like one of those things where like, oh, this is an opportunity to now lead. And that invigorated me to be like, oh, this could be a new experience. So I ended up choosing and accepting that promotion, and not pursuing that final interview. And that kind of kept me where I'm at. So it's one of those things where if I really look back, the forces have kept me here as much as I've tried to leave the field.
And your poor experiences with supervisors, I'm sure, shapes your behavior today in a way of, I know what it feels like to have crummy or not supportive supervision. So let me shape my behavior to support all of those that I do underneath me, to give them that opportunity to grow and feel like they have somebody in their corner, which I'm sure was like the guiding light for you accepting that position as a lead supervisor.
Completely. I mean, that was, it was one of the things that I told myself is I don't ever want anybody to experience what I experience. So that really shaped from day one the supervisor that I was going to be, and my commitments to my staff, that I was going to be present. I was going to be available to them for whatever their needs were. I was going to try to make them the best version of themselves. I was going to try to reduce the hardships as much as possible. I was going to connect with them. I was going to try to be a good mentor and all of that. So that really, you know, was the foundation of that next step for me as a supervisor, you know, and my enjoyment of that then led me to making the commitment. I want to make this a career, and that's what got me into grad school. And again, that has like a series of divine interventions too, because being a person that came from a limited means household, you know, being a minority, my parents didn't go to, I don't even think they went to high school, let alone college. So I was kind of venturing into the unknown there. I didn't feel like I had the grades to do grad school. It just felt like something that was gonna never happen. But I think the financial barriers were the biggest block for me, where I was like, this is just not in my cards, but I would love to do this. And you know, I get a little emotional with this because it was just one of those times where somebody steps in and gives you the opportunity to pursue this career, you know, and so it was I don't know that was going to happen, but that was not scripted. But it was one of those divine interventions too, where somebody offered me the ability to pay for school and be able to do that. So yeah.
In real time. Do you want a minute?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Back to
Here we go.
Game face.
But honestly,
Game face.
these are the beautiful moments too, because this is truly like what the field is about, and like the inner workings of everything. Because we're all clinicians, and we all have our own story and how we got here. But really, like we're interested in how you got to be who you are, and everything that shaped you. And there is like a really beautiful story. Because again, the thing that I think I connect with you with so much, and like I follow your story so much, is because the same struggle with needing to find someone to guide and lead and just kind of like create that path is my early career in ABA was kind of the same. They threw me to the wolves. I remember my very first day after I got it was Handle with Care training. They threw me in with the most aggressive student in the entire development, and they were like, well, let's see what you could do. And 7 hours later, covered in sweat, I was covered in bruises and scratches and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know if this is it. And if this is really the leadership in this company, like, I don't see myself lasting. So, you know, luckily I stuck it out. But the thing that I love about your story, again, is like you took every experience and you're opening the doors for so many people so that they don't have to break new ground. It's, hey, I've done this, so let me guide you. Let me show you the way that it should be, what real leadership is, and like I can answer those questions. And that to me is like everything that I ever wanted to be. Because when I became someone who was lucky enough to get a leadership position, I had the same thought. It's like I never want anyone to go through what I went through, because that sucked for me, and I didn't have anyone to turn to, and I didn't have any. It felt like no one was really in my corner until I got there. So now that I am, like, why not open those doors for other people? And then to jump a little farther back before we dive into the good stuff, is you talked a lot about like the family values, core values. Growing up, how did your family's lifestyle and just the way that you were growing up, how did that shape your work ethic?
Good one. You're piercing some emotional bubbles here, but yeah, I mean, my earliest memories of, you know, especially when it comes to work ethic is I used to live close to my grandparents' house, and you know, my family coming from more of a blue worker background. I remember my grandfather vividly would wake up at 3 a.m. every day. My grandmother would make him the burritos for lunch, but it was kind of an everyday thing where I just grew up being around people that were hardworking, that were providers for their family to the best of their ability. And, you know, although there wasn't a lot of extras, there was always the essentials there. So I just grew up with hardworking people around me that I was able to pull from. In particular, my grandfather, that was kind of a big inspiration when it came to just somebody that was committed to family and committed to working hard. So, yeah. So those are some of the early memories. You know, the other thing that I've just like recently become closer to is, and I spoke about this at last year's conference since we're at CalABA, is just the whole the mentorship that I received from my mom. There was a couple things that now I experience as kind of guiding principles in terms of, don't ever give up type of thing. The, probably because we didn't come from a lot of money, it was, don't worry about the money. Focus on your education, focus on working hard, and the money will be there. So that always gave me the faith to say, if I could work hard, everything will fall into place. Where I never had to pursue money. I just pursued what I felt was going to give me the best opportunity to grow, and trusted and had faith that the money was there. And that just provided me a different angle to my career, where I never made decisions based on who's going to pay me more type of thing. I always was attracted to more a culture or more mentorship, and a place that was going to create the room or allow there to be room for me to grow. And then it was up to me to work hard and take advantage of it. So, yeah.
And I mean, I'll say, for all of us can definitely speak on this, is you're someone that in a room full of people, if you left, they would all be speaking your praises within that room. And it's something that I think every good leader really wants to have, because truly, like, the mark of a person, the mark of their work ethic is how they speak about you when you're not there. And I can say with all honesty, you're someone that in every single room, in every single situation, they're like, have you talked to Isaac about this yet? Have you reached out to Isaac? Because he could guide you. I mean, I've come to you with a couple different things, and it was like within 3 or 4 minutes, you're like, yeah, how can I help?
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks. Yeah.
I will say the grand concept that you had brought up in terms of the core values and ethics that your family instilled in you. I don't think parents put much thought and effort into that as their kids are little, because it does kind of go over our heads for many, many years when we're children. But even reflecting back on my family core values and principles, I see very much like a similarity in our upbringings. And it's so funny because you don't realize that they're there until much later on in your career. And you're like, wow, I really value these things because they were modeled for so many years when I was young. But you don't realize that until like you're in the thicket of it. So it's fun to hear other people have similar experiences like that, especially from such like an early age. But I do remember you saying that although your mom said focus on education, that you didn't think you were going to have the grades to get into grad school.
Right. I didn't.
So I wanted to ask
the lights
you,
going off for all of us, like, oh,
I know,
let's talk about grades.
I think we all locked eyes and we're like, oh, wow, we were in a similar situation. So do you run into people now where you kind of explain to them where you are in life, or maybe even your parents run into people that knew you growing up and they tell them what you do and they're like, no freaking way. Isaac's not helping people that way.
Yeah,
I saw his grades because like that's
Right.
what happens to me and my family when we run into people.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know if I've hid that part well. I mean,
You have. I had no idea
Yeah.
until today.
people. I mean, I think people think of me as like responsible and all that. So then they make assumptions. But I mean, those early years in college, I dug myself a hole, and I had to dig myself out. And that's where I had to like really set goals, because again, it was more of a panic. I was like, oh my gosh, I won't even be able to transfer to a university if I continue this way. And it was, I kind of created a hole for myself that I dig myself out of, let alone the idea of grad school. I was able to graduate with very close to what I was hoping to graduate from, but that I didn't realize, or I didn't think that was going to be good enough for graduate school. I was like, that's just good enough to graduate, and then let's see where I could take this. But yeah.
And I like that we're talking about this because it came up similar in another podcast that we have done, that sometimes people just see the buttoned up versions of us and they don't know what we have come from. And it's really important to disseminate this because there are a lot of kids who do struggle in school. And that doesn't mean they're in a self-contained classroom or they have a learning disability. It just means that they're not getting good grades. And that doesn't mean you can't continue to grow or make something of yourself. And I think that's also where education sometimes fails us, because I don't know if the same thing had happened to you growing up, but I was told many times that I wouldn't ever, amount to anything because of my grades. And again, that sticks with you. That's forever like in the back of your head. Even as a full grown adult, sometimes that still like kicks in. Right, right. So being able to combat that with that grit mentality, having a support system, a mentor, like these are things that are so important, and so many people feel I'll never amount to what Isaac's doing or what Bree's doing or what Brandon's doing because I don't have the grades. And like
Neither do we.
That's what I'm trying to say. Neither did we.
Start a club. Yeah.
But if you just keep pushing and you believe and you put your ethics first and you grind and you try hard, you can get there too. Like, I'm sure if you ran into anybody that I used to go to school with and you told them that I help kids who have either a behavior disability or who are on the spectrum and I am very organized, I show up to things on time, like they would be like, no shot, we're talking about the same person.
Right.
So again, to hear that like you had a similar experience and like to show that vulnerability and like we haven't always been as put together as we seem now is so important for people to see.
Yeah, it did. And, it's, I think part of it, there's a part of me, I mean, I think people may experience me as maybe soft-spoken, mild-mannered, whatever it is, but there's like an inner complicated layer. And I don't know if I...
You're an onion. Multiple layers.
I don't know what kind of language is allowed in this podcast, but to like capture to capture it,
let it fly.
There's this voice that says like fuck that, and that's the voice that carries me through to the next thing, because it's like the feist of if I didn't have the grades, like F that, I'm gonna still try to pursue that. And so there is that layer that's been able to get me over the humps of when I feel like something's really challenging. Then it's like F that, and we're still going after it. So there is like multiple layers to this. So fuck that. We made it happen. So
I was gonna say that's not a mantra that like you just get overnight. It's usually like a ton of experiences. But can you recall something from your past that was like a pivotal moment of like, although I don't have the grades and although my history hasn't been the most stellar, I'm still going to push through this. Like that grit mentality. How did you shape your grit mentality to get to that, like, fuck that mentality?
Right. I think it's, for me, it was developed since I was a kid, just growing up in a more humble household. And again, I don't want to come off also as like, oh my gosh, we were living in the streets and stuff. Because, we had all the essentials, but there wasn't any extra. And I didn't grow up in a household where it's like, oh, I've done it all. Let me guide you through all these things. There wasn't a lot of extra stuff. So we had to, really fight for everything. So that kind of started shaping that piece of it. And I don't know, I think I get it just maybe it's my mom's genes, who's very feisty, that it just kind of comes out, and and no matter what, it's like F it, like we're going after it. So and that truly is what pushes me, and I guess I impose it on my team because they're very much the same way through all the challenges, and I've shared about, for BDA California, when COVID hit, we were literally in a conversation with Brett saying, we got to turn the corner or else we may need to shut down. And it was, fuck that. We're pushing through. And the whole team rallied around and said, not under our watch is this thing going down. So, I
think
guys
and the copier.
And the copier, yeah, for sure. It's very feisty. it's very,
I feel like we need context on that one.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, the good old copier. So I think it's just, the feist that comes from within, and it's developed environmentally through just how I grew up, but also, through probably the genes that I carry and my mother coming out of me. So, yeah.
Shout out, Mom.
Yeah. Yeah, she's very feisty. Sometimes too feisty, but.
So now, so we jump back. So now let's jump a little bit ahead. So you got the opportunity to have college paid for. You went ahead with it. You went for a master's in ABA?
I did. Not pretty close by to, it was a brick and mortar program. Cal State LA, is where I did my undergraduate under two amazing professors, Dr. G. Roy Mayer and Dr. Barry Lonenkron. So I felt like I got a really solid education. And, for me, so although my undergraduate grades weren't great, to me that was a new beginning, and I felt like I was in a place, maybe maturity wise, where I was able to commit myself, and I did get much better grades in graduate school. Plus, it helps when you're studying things that you're passionate about. That helps. So that was a bit of a different experience. But it was challenging nonetheless. So it was a tough program, and it definitely created, it's a big part of my foundation as an ABA professional. Is the education that I got from Cal State LA. It was a wonderful program.
Would you say that's where your like bigger organization skills kind of kicked in? Is like I have to stay on top of this, or I'm gonna.
Yes, but also ABA kind of brings out the perfectionism in people.
Yes.
So I think that's where I've gotten it, because even as a technician, when you're trying to run a session, back then we were doing a lot of tabletop programs and stuff, and I remember, I had a little box, and, the master targets had a baggie, and then the needed to be intro had a baggie, and I had file folders, and everything was very systematic. And to me, that just allowed me to do my best work. Because then I wasn't scrambling, going like, oh my gosh, well, what did I do last time? And like, I hated that feeling. So then, I just started to develop a system for myself to be able to be more efficient. And I was always somebody that didn't necessarily like to depend on, well, what's my company going to give me so I could do it? I was like, F that. I just go and buy my own stimuli and stuff, so that I had my own kit to be able to do the work that I did. So, it was just doing the things that allowed me to do my best work. And that's kind of where the organizational piece came. Yeah.
And I think that's something. So Kate and I were actually talking about this before when we're training new BCBAs, when they go through their new BC cohort. We spend a fair amount of time talking about organizational skills, because especially as a BC, you're a bit more autonomous. You have a caseload. You have to figure out who you're seeing when, how it's going to work in your schedule. So if you're not organized, you're cooked. You don't have you're just scrambling every day. You don't know what's coming, and you have to allow for that flexibility. So if you're not organized and you don't have those systems in place, then you're not really going to be able to do your best work in whatever capacity 100%. That is.
Yeah, you could be God's gift to ABA, but if you don't have those skills, you're, like you said, you're cooked. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also the unknown part, right? And that's when that burnout kicks in. It's like, what am I doing today? How am I going to cram all this in? What materials am I going to have? If you sit down and you organize that all on the forefront, you won't have as much stress. And then that burnout is going to be a lot less than if you just kind of went by the seat of your pants. And that works for undergrad. And maybe you can make that work for grad school if you have those principles down pat. But like you had said, it is rocket science. So yes, the core principles, those are easy to grasp. That's not the rocket science part. It's the application and realizing that not one situation is going to mirror another. And there is no grad school program that discusses organization. And honestly, like, it's such a huge foundational part of what we do. If you don't do that, like on Sundays, I look at my schedule every week to see where I'm going, what I'm doing, and then how I can cram in my personal things in that schedule. If I don't do that, I'm a wreck for the entire week. But I do want to fast forward because all of these foundational skills in terms of organization, great, being a great supervisor, and obviously those negative experiences has shaped what you do today. And that is mentorologist. So I do want to tell everybody what that is. And then you just laying down the grounds and the platform for people to be good supervisors. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I think along the way, one of my biggest sources of reinforcement and professional achievements, it's when I've been able to support a staff member grow and reach their potential, grow in their positions. The times that I ever hear people very graciously say, because of Isaac, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that to me is like the biggest honor in the world. So, as I kind of furthered my career, I started to ask myself, like, what is going to be my focus? Like, if I had to have a legacy, what would I want that to be? And to me, it hands down mentorship and supporting professionals to be the best versions of themselves, to have somebody that could possibly give them the experiences that I had, because I wouldn't be here without quality mentorship. So if I could create those opportunities for others, that to me is what it's all about. So then that passion and dedication in my career, recently, I say over the last 4 or 5 years, when we were opening up BDA California, I wanted to connect with the community and wanted to create a platform to deliver mentorship. I kind of call it non-denominational because it's not, like BDA to BDA people, but it's just to those that want to be part of it. So we created Mentorologists as almost like an executive coaching type of platform where we would get together once a month. We would, talk about, things that are challenging, talk shop a little bit. We would have a guest speaker. We would problem solve different things going on. So then that started going well. We had a group of 12 and we were meeting once a month. And then the pandemic hit, so then we weren't able to meet in person. So we pivoted over to online. And then that kind of created different aspects to Mentorologists. It became more of a dissemination tool. So then that kind of opened up our webinar series that we do once a month, where we bring in guest mentors to talk and share with the community or who's ever interested to talk about, things related to ABA. We created a YouTube channel to disseminate, where we have different types of shows on there, all really focused on mentorship.
I was just going to say, so listeners do know that anybody can attend these talks. It's not something that's just directly geared towards applied behavior analysis or BCBAs or RBTs.
Right. It's open to the public. It's been free for general admission. We do offer CEUs through BDA. So we tend to have behavior analysts because of the CEU aspect of it, but we do talk a lot about just different leadership concepts, mentorship concepts. So it could be beneficial to whoever wants to listen. Yeah, indeed.
There was one episode that you did on the mentorologist series, and it was you had an episode with Jose Rios, and you guys spoke about this one key term, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. And I was hoping maybe you could elaborate on it. Transformative mentorship. I think it's such an interesting concept, and it really does speak to like the further exploration of not just ABA, but like how we disseminate to one another, how we can be something to one another, but also meeting people where they're at. Like the same that we would work with students, one student is not going to learn the same as another. So could you maybe just touch upon transformative mentorship?
Well, Jose happens to be probably one of my biggest mentors and who I owe a lot to, and a big part of where I'm at. So, transformative mentorship and that concept is, through mentorship, being able to transform somebody's life. And, I guess I could be an example of, his investment in me. My life is very different through the work and the mentorship that I've received from him, because of the opportunities that me working with him has created, the people that I've been able to meet. I think I'm at BDA because of, this connection with Jose and some of the work that we've done. I met Brett when he was invited to be a guest speaker for CalABA many years ago. And, being on the CalABA board, I had the opportunity to introduce somebody. So I chose him, but the person that encouraged me to join a board was Jose. So if he wasn't there pushing and nudging and giving me the confidence to do that, I would never been in that position to be able to, meet who I consider a current mentor, Brett, and, it just everything kind of falls into place. But it kind of starts off with somebody being there, investing in you and pushing you, because I feel like mentors believe in you more than we believe in ourselves a lot of times. And that's who Jose's been. So
I think this is a big topic right now, especially in mentorship. So where do you think that fine line and balance comes from in terms of pushing people so they shape that grit behavior, but also to a point where you don't feel burnt out or that it's just too much for an individual? Obviously, it's going to be different person to person because everybody has different preferences, but what's something that you implement or try to teach your supervisors on how to kind of like find that balance and walk that line?
I think it's something that I've made mistakes on along the way. I used to push people in the direction that I wanted. It's like, so for instance, if I've liked presenting, it's like, you need to present, and everybody, until I was given the reciprocal feedback of, I don't want to present. I don't want to do all the things that you do. So then it really, it taught me to be more aware and open to hearing, well, what do you want? So it's kind of a little bit from an ACT concept in terms of really trying to identify their values and starting there. It's like, what do you want? And listening, and then guiding people towards what they want. And it doesn't have to be what I want or what I want for them, but it needs to be what they want. And as long as they're in alignment with their passions and their values, I feel like that's where, the motivation comes in and more grit comes in versus trying to push somebody to something that they don't want to do.
So you're saying that they'd be more willing to push through difficult tasks or situations when it's in line with their values and their goals and things that they see themselves doing. And I think that's hard too from a supervisor perspective, because you see potential in people, right? You see what they could be great at and you're like, oh, I wish you would pursue this because, right. Yeah. But I totally get, like, of course you want it to be, client centered or individual centered. Right. So that way they find more value in it and it's socially significant to them.
And also too, it's also accepting that not everybody may want to do what you and I did or what we've done. For instance, if I'm somebody that I had aspirations to do something in my career, others might not want to do that. Others might be more passionate, their values might be more, I want to spend more time with family. I want to spend more time at home. I want a work-life balance, and all that stuff is fine. Not everybody is going to be a workhorse, or it was going to be, whatever it is. So having acceptance of other people have different values, and that's okay. It might come with some limitations, and maybe that's where the mentorship comes in. It's well, you can't have it all. You can't not do certain things, but they'll still want what this provides. It's more accepting, this is really truly what you're passionate about. So do that, so I've had to really just be more accepting of everybody's different, and not everybody is wanting to be working 20 hours a day. That's something that I haven't minded doing. But that's my values. It's not other people's, so.
I think you bring up a good point though. So if you want this, the behavior that you're emitting, like only working 20 hours a week, is not going to lead you to that outcome, and being upfront and honest with them about that. That way they can evaluate, okay, if I really want to go right, but my behavior is only allowing me to go left, I need to change that.
And I oftentimes with the leaders that I work with, we talk a lot about shaping people, but also meeting them where they're at, because it's common for high-level leaders to get frustrated with their people. It's like, why aren't they doing all these things? It's like, I'm doing all these things. Why aren't they doing? And I have to remind leaders that, well, you're in your position because you did all those things, but not everybody is going to be in your position, right? So you have to meet them where they are and, really trust the principles of shaping. You want to shape them to perform better. But maybe we can't have the expectations that everybody needs to be a high-level leader, because not everybody's built that way, and that's okay. Like everybody's amazing, but they don't have to be, not everybody has to be like an executive. They might have other passions, or they might be built different, and that's okay. So
I can see that, because some people sometimes will come up to myself or other and be like, oh, you can open your own ABA company. And I'm like, I have zero desire to do that. I'm cool right where I am. Like, everybody just wants to jump from the very top. And it's like you had said, that is 0% of what I want to do in terms of a clinician or being a leader. Like, I like leading others, like you had said.
So now, we all kind of have our own little niche outside of ABA, our own little passions that drive us. What are some of the things that drive you outside of mentorship and work?
Yeah. Well, my kids and my family, my wife, my dog, all of those are, they're kind of the muse for everything that I do. My selfish passion is playing the guitar right now.
Okay.
Like, completely selfish.
But you're a beginner.
Yeah, I'm more a beginner, but I have really high goals for myself, and I'm trying to work on just progressing. And it's one of those humbling things, almost like golf, where it's like, I don't know if you're there's just a never ending aspect to playing the guitar. And so it's really challenging my mindset on it, because, it's something that I wish I could be better faster, but it's just more of the rigor of the discipline of practicing and
getting the scales and
Yeah, all of
Yeah.
that. So that's been more of my current obsession. You know,
Okay.
I brought a guitar with me today because, you know, well, not today, but here to this trip because
Are you gonna play on the podcast?
I wish.
Imagine he
That'll be
just,
the next
like-
time. That'll be next
Bust
time.
out
Like
a
it's like
solo.
a DeGeneres show when she like pulls it out. I was like, here you go, and like
Right.
starts playing
Yeah.
it.
Right. You got your singing voice? You ready?
Yeah, we
let's
could
do it.
Yeah,
we could-
Brandon could do
yeah, we could
vocals,
do
Let's
right?
jam.
No, and it's funny because you did actually speak about that on your podcast or
Yeah.
your podcast as well. There is something else too, and I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but don't you own your own wine company as well? You make your own wine.
Interesting. So I don't own it, but we so a friend,
Mhm.
one of our good friends, her dad owns it. So
Okay.
so then, you know, we kind of became brand ambassadors just by, you know, kind of giving him different thoughts of
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, we've done this at, you know, when we had exhibit booths and things. He's like, oh my gosh, like those are good ideas. So it's more like we're very close to them, so we kind of help the family
Collaboration.
business, and you know, it's allowed us to understand the whole wine
Mhm.
business more and stuff like that. So we do it for helping family type of thing. But yeah, that's Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's pretty cool.
yeah, it's been fun. It's been a
Get
kind
your
of a
hands in multiple pots.
Yeah.
All across the board.
yeah.
I was gonna say you come off as somebody who like picks up a new hobby and you become like hyper focused on it, and then you master it, and you're like, all right, what's the next thing? Because you're like, you always have to be working on something.
Yeah.
It is true. You know, my wife gives me a lot of feedback over it, so it's that's a strain in our relationship, but you know,
I'm sure she's gonna watch this and be like, yes, thanks, Kate.
right, right,
One
totally.
for me.
Right.
What is the dynamic between you two? Since you both work in the
Right.
same field, but you handle business differently.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's great. We get a chance to enjoy events like this together.
Yeah.
You know, and she's also a great behavior analyst. She's also an amazing mentor. So I get a chance to learn from her and kind of see her passion for the people that she works with and the connections. And, you know, I learn a lot from her. And, you know, we're just able to talk shop. We have the same colleagues and
Yeah.
the same circle of network people and stuff. So it's all been very synergistic. Yeah.
Yeah, which is refreshing because I think for our partners, a lot of times we're like, so I'm noticing you're doing this behavior.
Mm.
It would be really helpful if you organized X, Y, Z, or you did something this way. And then they're like, stop it. Stop analyzing me. I don't want this anymore.
Right.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's probably nice that you can talk shop.
Yeah.
Like it's a little bit of a relief because sometimes like we've talked about this before. You come home, people are like, "How was your day?
Right.
And you're like, "It was fine,"
Yeah.
because like the
it.
thought of going through it and like re-explaining or breaking down certain concepts, it just is like. It's another aspect of burnout, right? Like you got to relive it. If you could just like blurt out a couple, you know, instances of what had happened and the other person just go like, I totally get where you're coming from. That's such a relief in itself because now it's like, okay, I feel seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. You know, so some of the challenges are to be a good listener, and you know, I don't have to be solving her stuff, you know, and vice versa. So there are some little things that we have to be aware of. But overall, I think it's a big part of our relationship, at least for my opinion. She might listen to this and be like, no. And we get to, you know, enjoy behavior analysis stuff together, which then, you know, is just part of our relationship, like going to conferences. You know, that's something that, you know, it's part of our yearly schedule, but we do it together, you know, and every once in a while we do our own thing, and that's cool too. Like she has her own conferences that she goes to, I have mine, and you know, it's
I definitely think that's a hard thing to turn off as a behavior analyst is not being solution focused. So when you have a conversation with your significant other and they're bringing a problem to you, you're like, I want to say something to help you, but
know
I
how to
just
fix
got to
that.
sit here and be actively listening. You know what I mean? And validating
challenge,
Yeah.
your feelings and your standpoints on whatever you're talking about.
right. Yeah, no, it's a challenge, and you kind of walk the fine line because maybe they do want input,
Yeah.
and you know, so it's worked so far. I'll say that
There we
it's
go.
never a perfect science. It's rocket science.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So during the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of shutdowns. There was the fear of the unknown. How did you navigate that while also building up probably the most successful path for California into, you know, what it is now, which is such a well-run machine?
Right. Well, we were kind of at an advantage in the sense that we didn't have an office yet, so our work was was remote. So when the whole world shifted to remote, we were already doing that. You know, we did have to quickly learn how to provide remote ABA work. I mean, that was kind of like a hard pivot. And I think belief and the resolve that the team had was a big support, because even when I doubted it, because there were moments where I was contingency planning and saying, this is the first time I might be out of a job. Like, what's my financial situation? And I was trying to picture the worst case scenario. It also helps to have a great leader where, Brett was, very confident we're going to get through it. He provided that security and that, you're still going to have a job and that kind of thing. However, we got to make certain moves and all of that. So, I think it was a combination of that, great leadership during that time, a gritty team that kind of carried it through, and just being nimble and pivoting, and I would say during that time, we probably grew about 300% in our client base. We were able to start supporting schools during that time because they were having staffing issues. It's when we leased out the OLC in Orange County, so we started providing clinic-based services, which kind of sounds weird during the pandemic to have a physical space, but we kind of took advantage of some opportunities that came up, and we actually were able to catapult to the next level as a company.
It's wild that you guys actually
grew
during the pandemic when everybody talked about how they had to like scale back or had lost their jobs.
Right.
But I think it's important to note too that that's like the perfect example of showing people as entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, which we can talk about in a second, that things don't have to be perfect in order to grow and keep going. Sometimes it's during those times of adversity where you have to really say, okay, F this, we're going to do it. And we have to, be flexible. We have to pivot, and that's okay. Right. Plan A didn't work, but, as
Isaac
you had
has
contingency,
plan B.
Right. Yeah.
Plan B, C, all the way through to know, okay, here's what we're going to do next. Right. And I think, having that team and having that leader is helpful too.
Yeah. I think so. And you said it right. F it. Right.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
When it comes down to it and you have to make a decision, that helps.
If that's not the name of this episode, I don't know what it should be.
It could be.
Right.
What's a helpful tip that you can give other clinicians who might be a little bit more structured or rigid about being able to pivot when something's not working?
Right.
There's a lot of clinicians that are just like, I'm going to bang my head into a wall until this like fixes itself.
Yeah.
But strictly pivoting is the only way. How do you, what's your advice on that?
I think we all, those of us who have the quality and the suffering of being a perfectionist, I think
suffering is a good word.
Sometimes, I think we have to be working intentionally on being flexible, so to set the occasion or create opportunities for us to let go of our rigidity and, just practice the flexibility. So we have to just work at it, and I think the more you do it, then the more you're able to pivot. And then also, if you're not able to get out of your own way, to be able to have a trusting team and leaders around you where you trust them to help you be flexible.
Yeah.
That sometimes people have to kind of carry you through the other side of things. But if you're practicing flexibility and surround yourself with the right people, I think that's the combination.
That's easier said than done sometimes. I
Yeah,
will say
for
that.
sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's so kind of circling back. I know as we're starting to wrap up, I mentioned intrapreneur.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, what would you say is the difference between an entrepreneur versus an intrapreneur?
Good question. Well, I did dabble in entrepreneurship, the classic entrepreneurship, where I did open up an ABA agency and grew that with a partner at the time, and it was kind of the classic journey of shoestring budget. We pulled whatever dollars we had out of our savings, and we named the company on the kitchen table, that whole thing. And what I learned from that experience, it's, you get a lot of rich experiences, but entrepreneurs are wired different, and having worked with many entrepreneurs, I don't want to overgeneralize because I'm sure this is not the case, but, to be an entrepreneur and to be able to tolerate the amount of risk and you have to have a certain level of confidence that, to be able to do the things that you do, that's just a different wiring. And not everybody's like that. And I think what I hear, it's too sexy these days to be like, oh, I want to own my own company and I want to be an entrepreneur. And it just, a lot of times it's not, it's a grind. And I remember when I was doing that, I was working 2 shifts. Like my day shift was the regular work, and then I had a night shift doing all the back end stuff. And that was, you know, for 3 years doing that. And so it's really, a lot of times it's not sexy. And there's a lot of liability. You're dealing with a lot of responsibility in your hands. If something goes wrong, that's like on you type of thing. So somebody has to really be wired to be able to handle that and have the resources and all of that. So, but I think a lot of what entrepreneurs do, you could do within a company, and that's where I know I'm not the one that came up with this title, because I know it's very much on Google. But when I started presenting about the topic of entrepreneurship, I feel that anybody could be an entrepreneur within their own company, and it's probably obvious for higher level leaders because, they're either creating a department, they're opening up a branch. So that's kind of obvious. But I always tell my staff at every level, you could be an entrepreneur. As a tech, you could be an entrepreneur, because really what entrepreneurs do is, they pinpoint certain results that they need to happen, a certain ROI. They take a look at KPIs that are really important, and they start managing their company through a series of data, right? But I think at every level, it's the same thing. It's like for techs, like what do we pinpoint? What are their deliverables that create value for their position? Because companies are trying to create value for themselves. They're trying to be able to get into funding sources. They're trying to create a stream of capital. So is everybody else. We're all trying to position ourselves to get a promotion, to get a raise, to get pay for performance, whatever it is. And I think if techs have this mindset of, even if it's, I need to have good attendance, I need to have good conversions, those are all critical KPIs to their position. So if they took more of that mindset and started tracking it, and I always tell staff who would listen, is go to an evaluation meeting with your boss with that data already in hand, because I promise you're going to blow them away. If you say, well, you don't need to ask me how my attendance, because I already know, and here it is. It's like that alone, to have a portfolio of your performance as an entrepreneur, I promise you and who's ever listening, you're going to blow your boss away. And that's something, as a mindset, I remember the few times I've interviewed at different places, I would always carry a portfolio of my work, as a kind of a record of this has been my impact at different companies. So I'm not going to wait for them to ask me. I'm going to tell them, like, this is what I could do for them. So should everybody else. I would love for people to come to me and say, like, this is how I'm doing. It's like, I'm blown away. And I think I've had one experience recently where somebody actually took me up on that, and she's headed in the right place. So that to me, it's
blocks of entrepreneurship
Yeah.
is just taking that initiative.
Yeah, taking the initiative, knowing what's valuable for their position. So it kind of goes into the 5 principles of OBM, being able to pinpoint, goal set for themselves. Essentially, it's really good self-management, and being in really good alignment with your company. It's really for them to know what's important for the company, just like an entrepreneur needs to do. They need to know what's important for the industry and, create a company that's going to create value for the industry to be able to generate revenue and to be able to pay staff and all of that stuff. So an entrepreneur could do the same thing.
Do you need good grades?
I hope not, because then I wouldn't be there. Yeah.
I will say I love that we're talking about this, because I don't think many people know that this is a path that they can go down. I think, like you had said, like, you think that you can just be an entrepreneur and that's it. However, when you get down into the nitty gritty and see everything that needs to go into it, Brett talks about this all the time. Like, there is no work-life balance when you're starting an organization or a company. So you can kiss that goodbye for a little bit. And if you do have that, your company may not be as successful as if you put in all of your time and effort into it. So, and there's many other things that go into that. But as you begin to turn over all of those concepts, it may not fall into your line in values or ethics or what you want for yourself. So knowing that there is something else that you can go down a different path, I think is super important.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you take a look even at our industry, a small percentage are business owners. The vast majority are people that work for those business owners. So I think the more of the masses should consider the concepts of entrepreneurship, and that you don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur to be able to explore that repertoire of behaviors and of concepts that goes with entrepreneurship. It's, so I'm trying to speak to more of the masses, because more of us are not business owners in the classical sense, right?
And a lot of us don't want to be.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like I said, to have another avenue is is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I would say entrepreneurs need us to be entrepreneurs, for them to be successful. So it's symbiotic. Like we both need each other to be successful, for the company to be successful, which is, why I promote the concept so much of entrepreneurship, is because that also helps the company be more successful, just like it's going to help the individual.
Especially if you're willing to self-monitor your own behavior. I think we talk about this all the time. That's one of the hardest things to do, because you really have to be upfront and honest with yourself and say, wow, now that I've looked at my own behavior and I really stink at this, I need to solicit feedback from other people so I can grow. And that's hard to do. So if you have an employee or an entrepreneur in the company that's willing to do that, it shows that you care and that you're able to take that, internalize it, and then apply it. And that shows that they're in there for the long haul, because they want to grow and they want to be better.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I think an entrepreneur has a sense of ownership as well, where, I may not own BDA California, but to me, it, like, I feel like it's my baby as well, and I feel that any liability I create, I get, it might ultimately be Brett's, but it's also on me, and so that's also part of that mindset too, is that you take ownership over what you do.
Agreed. And I will say, like, not everybody operates as Brett does, but I know that he doesn't ever make you feel like that either. Correct? That, like, hey, this is mine. So you feel as if you are an equal, and you're just as responsible for the growth as he is.
And that's a quality of his great leadership, to be able to do that, because not every leader is able to make you feel like that, just the way Brett is. So, yeah.
So as we're wrapping up today, where can our listeners find you, and do you have any upcoming events?
Yeah, so I mean, one place is Mentorologist. So we have a YouTube channel. If you type in Mentorologist, not meteorologist, Mentorologist, you'll go there. And, so a lot of the dissemination work that we do for mentorship, we put there, BrettDiAssociates.com/California. Also talks about the work that we do here in California. I suppose you could find me on Instagram, but that's probably not the best place. LinkedIn, if you just type in my name, I'll pop up there, and that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Cool. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Check out thekarmacollection.com for stylish, ABA-inspired apparel that spreads the message of behavior science with every wear. Free shipping on orders over $120. thekarmacollection.com